Well, new questions surrounding Lois Lerner, the woman, one of them, at the center of the IRS scandal. A former Republican Senate candidate, he was running for Senate out in Illinois against Dick Durbin, says Lerner targeted him long before this latest controversy. Just ahead, we'll hear why he says Ms. Lerner tried to end his political career and what he thinks about these allegations that Ms. Lerner is apolitical. Was that his experience? I'll ask him. Now, more on our top story and the dramatic moments at one of the two hearings on Capitol Hill investigating the IRS's targeting of conservative groups. Some of the most compelling testimony we've seen at all in all of this came this morning from the victims of the IRS's targeting, and in particular from a woman today named Becky Garrettson, who was president of a Tea Party group in Alabama. She choked back tears and described how she says the IRS harassed her and her husband. Listen.
I'm not here as a serf or a vassal. I'm not begging my lords for mercy. I'm a born-free American woman, wife, mother, and citizen, and I'm telling my government that you've forgotten your place. It's not your responsibility to look out for my well-being and to monitor my speech. It's not your right to assert an agenda. Your post, the post that you occupy, exists to preserve American liberty. You've sworn to perform that duty, and you have faltered. The abuses I will discuss today occurred on your watch, and it's your responsibility to make sure it doesn't happen again. The Wetumpka Tea Party filled out a complete application. Our organization fell within the boundaries of receiving a 501c4 status, yet our application was singled out solely because we had Tea Party in our name. Government agents made invasive and excessive demands for information they were not entitled to. Congressman Camp and members of this committee, this was not an accident. This is a willful act of intimidation to discourage a point of view. What the government did to our little group in Wetumpka, Alabama, is un-American. It isn't a matter of firing or arresting individuals. The individuals who sought to intimidate us were acting as they thought they should in a government culture that has little respect for its citizens. Many of the agents and agencies of the federal government do not understand that they are servants of the people. They think they are our masters, and they are mistaken. I'm not interested in scoring political points. I want to protect and preserve the America that I grew up in, the America that people cross oceans and risk their lives to become a part of. And I'm terrified it is slipping away. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Jay Sekulow is chief counsel for the American Center for Law and Justice, and he represents that woman and her group. And Jay, what a powerful moment when we heard Becky this morning offering that testimonial. And I just want to jump to, if I can, with you, Congressman McDermott, who apparently wasn't very moved. I mean, maybe that's an assumption. I don't know. But his response to her was to say, and to the others, to say, look, your groups are highly political. You're all entrenched in some of the most controversial political issues in the country. You were seeking to have the American public pay for your work, and so why shouldn't you be subjected to scrutiny?
Well, you know, let's be honest. What the representative did was basically ignore the fact that the ACLU is a 501c4, as is Planned Parenthood, and they're engaged in these kind of activities that he's found that these individuals, by wanting to engage from the other viewpoint, shouldn't be asking for their exempt status. So it was a double standard at best. But I think what Becky said is the resounding point here. I mean, it's the government without check. That's the problem. We'll ultimately find out who was really responsible for this and how far up it went. But at the end of the day, when you hear from people like Becky, who we represent, and 24 others in very similar situations to hers, you realize the intimidation factor coming out of the IRS was incredible. And Megyn, I think it goes one step further. The discouragement that organizations face when they're put under this kind of scrutiny for no reason whatsoever. The questions that were asked were not within the scope of legitimate inquiry. The IRS kept changing the questions as the cases move forward. And we still have 10 clients of the 25 that don't have their tax-exempt status, 3 years pending. So the question will be, we filed that lawsuit last week. The question is going to be, when the government answers, are they going to deny the allegations in our lawsuit, which they've already admitted to? To me, that's going to be the most fascinating aspect of this. Will the government say, We did not target, deny the allegations on targeting, because they've admitted it now more than once. So we'll see how that plays out.
Well, that's the thing. And now people are asking, how far up did this go? Who ordered it? I mean, why can't we get an answer to that? We started this broadcast today at 1 p.m. by playing an exchange yesterday on the Hill between the Inspector General and lawmakers where they said, Inspector General, who ordered it? And he said, I asked that question during my audit and they wouldn't give me an answer. And now, Jay, when people are asking, well, did it go back to Washington? And if so, high up in Washington, the brushback is, you know, there's no evidence to tie this to the White House or any higher ups in Washington, and anybody who suggests that is a conspiracy theorist and a political person. But you were suggesting that this was political targeting from the beginning, and you were told repeatedly it wasn't, it's not, and no targeting is happening. And we saw the head of the IRS go on Capitol Hill and testify it wasn't happening. And now we know that those assurances were not true.
Yeah, and the planted question to Lois Lerner that she had planted at the ABA meeting where she confessed to the targeting and offered her apology. But look, Megyn, I've said this before. I've got letters in my files right now from Washington, D.C., from tax lawyers with Treasury, IRS, on Department of the Treasury letterhead, Internal Revenue Service, with the the logo in the corner, signed by a tax lawyer for the IRS that was handling a case not in Washington, D.C., not in Maryland, not in Virginia, but out in Albuquerque, New Mexico. So the idea that this didn't come out of Washington or have a significant Washington involvement is absolutely bogus. And I don't understand for the life of me, and I still don't, why the government acts as if we don't have the letters, because the answer is we do have the letters. We've got the evidence. We've got the correspondence back and forth. So this, nobody can answer any questions about who authorized it, but I've got the documents, letters with Lois Lerner's name on it, Holly Paz, these various tax lawyers. So they're playing hide and seek when the game is really up here. And what the government needs to do is just confess error and get on with this, because they're still in a process of almost self-denial, even though they've made an admission.
And I want to ask you quickly before I let you go, that the assertion by Congressman McDermott saying to your client and the others up there, I haven't heard a single word here about what questions you think we ought to be able to ask you about your tax-exempt status. Is that the responsibility now of Becky and the others, that now they've got to go before the House Ways and Means Committee and explain to them what's appropriate and what's not?
Yeah, Congressman McDermott needs to read the Internal Revenue Manual, and the IRM, as it's called, sets forth the questions that they can ask for a legitimate inquiry into 501c4 status. The problem here was, of course, those weren't the questions they asked. They didn't ask, how political your engagement might be. They wanted to know the positions you were advocating and how often you advocated that particular position. So it wasn't simply issue advocacy, which is allowed, of course, but they wanted to know your position on it. Or in the one case, they wanted to know the students you were teaching.
Yeah, and give us your donor list.
So outside legitimate inquiry. Yeah, outside of legitimate inquiry.
Jay, thank you.
Thanks, Megyn.